You're listening to the Deep Purple Podcast, a fan podcast about one of the most legendary bands of all time, Deep Purple. We take a look at the music, history, and people behind the band Deep Purple and beyond. Welcome to the Deep Purple Podcast, and today we've got something a little different, a little bonus episode for you. This is an interview that I did with Martyn Ford, who is the arranger, conductor of the Martyn Ford Orchestra, who's worked with a number of people, including the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, Grateful Dead, Phil Collins, Elton John, Elf, and of course with Roger Glover on the Butterfly Ball, and that was the main reason for me getting in touch with Martyn. I sent him a nice little note from on his website and just kind of said, hey, I'd love to chat with you about this project. Not really expecting to hear anything back. He was very kind, got back to me right away. We set up this time to talk, and in this interview, you'll hear us talking about the Butterfly Ball, his beginnings in the music industry, working with Eddie Hardin, Spencer Davis Group, playing at the Royal Albert Hall, his album Smoovin, working with John Gustafson, Jesus Christ Superstar, Yvonne Elliman, Paul McCartney's Live and Let Die project, his work on the Vision 2020 project, working with the Mandarin artist Fifi Rong, and of course, his work with Mo Foster and putting him in touch with Phil Collins. So a lot of really good information in this interview. And this is a first for us at the Deep Purple Podcast, doing one of these interviews, but hopefully not the last. It was an absolute blast talking with Martyn. He was a very, very kind, funny person and very generous with his time. So we're very appreciative of him. If you're listening to this, you may have heard our episode where we played a few snippets from this interview, and this is the full interview for those of you who want to check it out. Thank you so much. And here we go. Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, I suppose, to you.
Hey, got you. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Where are you?
I am in outside Chicago.
Okay. So it's early morning for you. You're very bright and early.
Yeah.
My goodness me, I see a reel-to-reel tape recorder. This is a thing from the dim and distant past. I see a Butterfly Ball poster up on the wall.
Yes.
Well, not only do you play keyboard, play bass guitar and six-string guitar.
A little bit. I'd like to think I do anyway.
Okay. Right. Now, I don't know how much use I'm going to be to you, but I will do my best to answer any questions that I can. But it's a long time ago, and of course, I have very strong memories of one or two things. Oh. Whether any of those are of any interest to you whatsoever, I haven't the foggiest idea.
I assure you they will be. It's I'm in my early 40s, but I discovered this album as a young teenager and really, really meant a lot to me. And in researching it, and we just finished doing four episodes on the album, covering the musicians, the singers, the album itself, and just really interested in anything more that I can learn about it. So I guess my main question is, how did you first hear about the project and get involved with it?
Okay. So how did I first hear about the project? I guess I first heard about the project through Roger, because Roger Glover and I go back a long way. I don't know how I first met him. I can't remember. But I was a well-established by then orchestral arranger, conductor, player, and to a lesser extent record producer in London at that time. I just started my career about 1970. Okay. So I can't. What year was Butterfly Ball recorded? You'll obviously know. I don't.
It was 1974.
Oh, there we go. So I was comparatively early in my career. I was still really quite a new kid on the block. I was the flavor of the month. I mean, in the music business, when you're in the scene, things go around in cycles, and I just had a couple of huge hits. I got very lucky, and I guess my name was sort of, out there, and people were beginning to know what I was doing. And I don't know how I met Roger, but he, I suspect I'd started what we call fixing in London. I was what we call an orchestral contractor. That's one of the many strings to my bow. So I formed my own orchestra when I was at the Royal Academy of Music, and that orchestra monopolised the recording industry for about 30 years in London. And I already really was monopolising the industry already by 74. So Roger probably heard about my orchestra, and he invited me to use my orchestra to play on Butterfly Ball. He probably then knew that I played the French horn, which I did. He probably also knew that I was a conductor and arranger. So I remember going to Kingsway Studios and playing French horn on a couple of the tracks so you can hear me. I can't remember what the tracks are called now. Is there one called something about the Herald? Something like that? Harold the Herald or something?
There's a character, Harold the Herald, and I know there's a it's probably the song Get Ready, which Glenn Hughes sung on.
Yeah, so if you hear any sort of French horn stuff, fanfare stuff, that's me playing.
Oh, great.
And then he also asked me to do some orchestration. So, and again, you probably know more than I do because I haven't had time to look at the credits before I spoke to you. But I know that I arranged a couple of the tracks for orchestra. I can't remember which ones they were now. And I would have conducted those. So we worked in Kingsway Studios, which is in the sort of West End of London, near Kingsway, which is a famous road in Holborn, which is sort of in the West End, quite near Drury Lane. And Purple did all their recordings there. I don't know why. I guess maybe it was their studios. Maybe you know this. I don't know.
Well, yeah, apparently Ian Gillan had recently purchased it. It was Delane Lay Studios before that, and he had purchased
Delane Lee. Yes, Delane Lee. And then I told you know more about it than I did. The fans always know more about it than the actual artists because, especially in my position as an arranger, producer, conductor, I work with hundreds of different people. So this is just one project, a wonderful project, but just one project. So remembering all the finite detail is pretty hard. All right. So Ian, of course, who I know, bought Kingsway. So that would explain why Purple did all their recording there.
That's great. How it was I'm sure you were kind of bouncing around a lot of different projects, like you said. How long were you working on this project? Was it a very quick thing?
Well, I think it was pretty quick. I imagine Roger put it together pretty quickly. My time in the studio was probably only a matter of a week here and there, different days scattered around. Probably went in for a day to do the French horn stuff and went in for another day to do the orchestra stuff. I mean, I can always look it up. If you tell me the recordings were in 74, I have every single file for every single session sheet that I ever worked on or ever booked.
Oh, wow.
All in sheets of A4 paper with carbon copies. I don't suppose you know what a carbon copy is.
I do.
Everything was typed out on a typewriter and then a carbon copy was done. So all the invoices that were sent off to the record companies to pay for the project, I have all that stuff. So I have all the original bills, all the original lineups. So I could go back to get my 1974 box out. I could probably do that now if you wanted me to. Go up in the loft, get out 1974, flick through, find Butterfly Ball. I could tell you exactly who played on what, at what time, in what studio, and how much they got paid for it. Wow. I have all that information at my fingertips.
Well, you're keeping very good records.
Well, it's turned out to be very useful because all the hit stuff now, the stuff that it doesn't apply to Butterfly Ball very much, but anything that I worked on that became a hit and is therefore has airtime, anything that's played on the radio anywhere in the world now that I performed on, I get paid for. It's only, might only be a matter of pennies or a few dollars or whatever, but over a period of weeks, months, years, that adds up.
And with the amount of artists you've worked with,
I've got about 25 or 30 tracks that give me an income, that keep me alive. It's my pension. You laugh, but it's true. It's like I don't have a pension, I don't have a life insurance, I have a state pension, but every time Can't Hurry Love by Phil Collins, or I Can See Clearly Now by Johnny Nash, or Angie by the Rolling Stones, or Come On Eileen by Dexys Midnight Runners, blah, 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 blah. All those big hits that get played still all the time on radio stations, I get money for, so it keeps me alive just.
Wow, that's incredible. So when you talk about the fact that you had your own orchestra, was that unusual back then, that the conductor orchestra, everything was, you had this all in one unit, or was that a common thing?
No, it was very unusual. It was the first, really. I'll tell you how it happened, if you're interested.
Of course.
So I went to the Royal Academy of Music when I was 24. Prior to that, I had a proper job. I was a zoologist, a research entomologist at the Natural History Museum.
Oh,
wow. I played French horn and all right through my teen years. I'd always been interested in rock. I'd always been interested in science. I'd always been interested in classical music. So I did 3 years at the museum, and then I decided that I actually wanted to be a musician. So I applied to go to the Royal Academy of Music. In my third, and of course I went there when I was 24. Most people go when they're 18. So I was and 6 years is quite a big age gap when you're that age. So I was a lot more sort of world-wise and mature than most of the students there. And in my third year, when I was 27, so I was a full-time student, so I was 28, I decided that there was no interplay, there was no communication between the four main London music colleges. There's the Royal College of Music, the Royal Academy of Music, the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and Trinity College of Music. There's also the London College of Music. They're all, very well-known establishments, but they had no communication with each other at all. And at that time, I was playing in 7 different amateur orchestras a week in London. Every night I was playing in a different orchestra, A, for practice, and B, to learn all the repertoire. So I was playing a different symphony every night. So in a matter of 4, 5, 6 years, I learned a lot of music in a very short space of time. This is in addition to the orchestras I was playing in when I was at the academy. And I found that a lot of other students were doing the same thing. So I was meeting a lot of other students of my generation who were at the other music establishments. And I just thought, well, this is crazy. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I met up with a guy who I got on with very well. He was a conductor, and we hit it off, and we liked the same sort of music. And I said to him, I know what I'll do. I'll form an orchestra of the best, most gifted music students from the 5 London music colleges, and we'll put on a concert. So I hired the Royal Albert Hall, as you do. At those days, it cost me 360 quid. I think now it would cost about 10 grand.
Wow.
And I formed this orchestra. I handpicked all the best students from all the London music colleges. I went to meet the principals at the colleges and said, this is what I want to do. And they gave it my blessing. And we put on this concert at the Royal Albert Hall. We played a symphony program. We played Schubert, Dvorak, and Bruckner. I picked the music, of course, so it was my favourite music, and I played principal horn. And the orchestra was absolutely sensational. And we got rave reviews from the press. Nobody went to the concert, but there were hardly anybody in the hall. But the press were there, and the orchestra were amazing. So that was the first step. Then what happened was I don't know if you've ever heard of a group called Barclay James Harvest.
I have not. No.
Okay, they were a group based in Manchester who were around late 60s, 70s. They're still existent. In the 70s and 80s, they were the biggest group in Germany. They were the top-selling group in Germany for well over a decade, and Germany is the 3rd biggest record market in the world at that time. So they were huge. They had recorded an album at Abbey Road using an orchestra, and they used a session orchestra. And they wanted to go on the road with an orchestra. So this is a very long answer to a very short question.
No, this is great stuff.
They wanted to go on the road with an orchestra, and it just happened that my second bassoonist was a friend of their music director. And he said, you should talk to Martyn Ford. He's got this amazing orchestra of music students that are absolutely brilliant. And they'd be up for it because they get rock music. And they approached me, and indeed we did go on the road. So we went on the road with a kind of a 60-piece orchestra, when we do all the major British venues: Royal Festival Hall, Royal Albert Hall in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Edinburgh, Glasgow, blah, 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 all the Sheffield, all the major capitals in the UK we did. And then afterwards, we did more. I went abroad with them. I went to South Africa. I went to Switzerland. I went to, can't remember now, but anyway, other places. And then from then on, their second album, they used my orchestra, and their third album, they used my orchestra, and then I became their arranger and conductor. By then, at the same time, I'd been introduced to a couple of people in the business, producers and disc jockeys, who introduced me to other people, and gradually, suddenly within a year, my orchestra became very, very established as a recording session orchestra in London. So as a conductor and arranger, I had my own orchestra already at my fingertips. And because the session scene in London had been governed by the sort of old school, I have to be very careful what I say here because I don't wish to be politically offensive to anybody, but a certain style and a certain race of people that were well known for playing on the London session scene. And they were wonderful, wonderful players, don't get me wrong, but they didn't really get rock music, and they didn't have a feel for it, and they didn't like it either. Mm-hmm. And here we had a bunch of kids who they could play as well. They could feel the music much better. They had a much more sense of rhythm and style because they'd grown up with rock and roll and pop. And I just monopolized the business. So within 10 years, people would fly in from the States. I had Toto and Art Garfunkel, blah, blah, Grateful Dead. They all flew to London just to use my orchestra in Abbey Road. You know, that's how quickly it blossomed. So I'll give you an example. When I was living in London, my last year at the Academy as a student in 1974, I was living on £12 a week mature students grant. Mm-hmm. That's about $20 a week in London. Living on that was food, transport, rent.
Right.
In my first year, the orchestra, we did a £250,000 turnover.
Wow.
Which was, so we're talking sort of $500,000. $500,000 in 1974 was quite a lot of money.
I can imagine.
So that was turnover. It wasn't profit, that was turnover. But that was money being paid to my musicians, and about 10% of that was my income as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of how quickly we just exploded onto the recording scene. So you found me through my website. So no doubt you looked at my discography. So you can see the people that I work with.
Absolutely. I just scrolling through, it's almost too much to take in. I mean, so many either songs I'm very familiar with or some of my favorite music you've been involved with in some way or another. And it's amazing. It sounds like you kind of did have, you, like you said, you monopolized that business by kind of this brilliant idea you had of having an all-in-one plug-in solution when everyone at the time, I guess this was probably in the early 70s, still kind of new to bring in an orchestra to play on a rock album, right? And you were there when everyone started to want to do it.
Absolutely. I didn't get all the work, and there was some work that I wish I'd got that I didn't get, but I've still got a lot of it. Yes, let's put it like this. I was very lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, but I also had a brilliant product. So, and all of those things came together. So, as is always the case in life, if you're in the right place at the right time, you still need luck. And it doesn't matter how brilliant you are, you still need luck. So the whole package came together in one, and it was fantastic. And in a way, although I don't do that anymore, I'm a bit of a has-been now, but as I say to people, it's better to have been a has-been than a never was. And I'm 75 years old, and I'm still working, and I'm still conducting, and I'm still doing recording sessions, and I'm still playing, and I feel blessed that the phone still rings.
Excellent. That's great. So you also worked with the Spencer Davis Group as well. That would have been one of your earlier.
Very briefly. I played for Horn on a couple of tracks.
Okay.
We recorded at Ramport Studios, which is the Who's studio in South London in Battersea. That's no longer there either, like a lot of recording studios. So recording studios are folding up all the time in the UK. Sure. But yeah, I worked with Spencer Davis, and funnily enough, I went to see them. They're still on the road. Spencer's still on the road. I went to see them about 10 years ago. They were gigging in Nottingham, and I went to see them. Eddie Hardin, funnily enough, Eddie Hardin was playing keyboards.
Oh,
with Spencer Davis, and you probably know. I'm telling you stuff you already know, but Eddie played on Butterfly Ball, and he did the live gig at the Royal Albert Hall. So
yes, yep. And were you involved in the live gig, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on stage.
Oh, okay.
I was there. It was my orchestra.
Oh, okay, so you weren't conducting.
I was very, very pissed off with Roger because he wanted to use my orchestra, and he booked me to use my orchestra, and I'm playing on it. I'm playing French horn. I wanted to conduct it, and he asked. I can't remember the guy's name now who conducted it. You all know. He's quite a well-known arranger who he arranged a couple of Elton's albums. He would have done Yellow Brick Road. I can't remember his name now after Buckmaster. I can't remember his name, but anyway. Who did the arrangements on Yellow Brick Road?
Is it It's not
is it Derek, somebody?
It's not Del Newman, is it?
Yeah, Del Newman.
Del Newman. Okay.
Yeah, Del Newman, the very same. Yeah, there we are.
Okay. And do you know why?
Del conducted the Butterfly Ball Orchestra, and I was playing. And Del's fine, but he's a good arranger. He's a nice bloke, but not the greatest conductor in the world. But it was fine. It was good, and it was an amazing gig. And they still talk about it. And Eddie, before Eddie died, he'd been nagging Roger for about 10 years to resurrect it and redo it, but I guess Roger was always on the road, always recording his own stuff. And I see Roger quite often and talk to him quite often. I've got some nice pictures of him and I together. And as he said to me when I first met up with him a few years ago, he said, "Martyn, I've been on the road since 1982, you know. All they do is gig, you know, they just go on tour. That keeps him alive. They can still fill 20, 30,000 seaters. They can't sell a record, but they can sell out stadiums. So especially in Eastern Europe and the States. So why not? They'll carry on doing it until they drop dead, I guess."
Right. It's very interesting to me growing up in America. Deep Purple is very well known. The name is very well known, but outside of Smoke on the Water and a few other tunes, people don't really know much about the band or the history of the band. And when I started to discover it, and this would have been the early 90s, it was very difficult finding the albums. You'd have to go to these import shops and hope for the best, and it was very hard piecing it all together. And when you talk about Deep Purple here, it's such a different story. But when you're talking to somebody from Europe about the band, it doesn't even compare to what Europeans think about Deep Purple or know about Deep Purple. And something like the Butterfly Ball, that was something my parents happened to go on a trip to England when I was in high school. And I told them, "Could you please try to find this album for me?" Because I had only had like a copied cassette from a friend that didn't even have all the songs on it. And it was much more difficult then to get some of this music. So it's really exciting to me it's great now in a way to be able to have all this stuff at your fingertips.
Yeah, and presumably you've now got albums and whatever, and you got the book. You got the Ainsworth's artwork book, which is absolutely stunning.
Yes, yep. I've got the book. In fact, I used to read it to my kids as a bedtime book, and I purchased it for myself just because I was interested in the Butterfly Ball. I think it was even before they were born. But then, I read that to them as a bedtime book. It's really it's a great book.
Yeah, and the artwork's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's amazing. I think he said it took him like a year and a half just to do the artwork, and it's so intricate. I believe it. So when I was researching this, there was a lot of confusion because I saw Martyn Ford, I saw Martyn Ford. So was that done intentionally as kind of a play on words, or how did that Martyn Ford come about?
Martyn Ford is me. Martyn Ford was my company. So sometimes you'll see the Martyn Ford Orchestra or organised by Martyn Ford. So there were three of us. I had a financial director and a sort of PA, but that was me. I also had a publishing music company. My music publishing company was called Martyn Ford. And then, of course, I had T-shirts on that said "Farting Maud." There were continual plays on words on Martyn Ford.
So you worked on this great, which I've still been looking to find a decent copy of, but this great album "Smoovin." And that,
really?
And how did that come up? I in looking through it, it seems like that was very particularly in Germany, right? Albums similar to that were very popular at the time.
Well, I guess it was kind of the beginning of the sort of disco era. Dance music was really beginning to happen. I was working for. Well, I've already described what I was doing, and one of the record companies in London at the time was called Mountain, and they had the sensational Alex Harvey band. They had Nazareth and a couple of Wales O'Regan, a couple of other sort of minor artists. And I'd done some arrangements for Nazareth and for the sensational Alex Harvey band as an arranger, conductor, with my orchestra. And then Denny McCafferty, who was the lead singer with Nazareth. I don't know if you're aware of Nazareth.
Sure, yeah.
He did a solo album, and I did all the orchestrations on that. And then one day, the two head guys at Mountain called me in to their office and said, "Martyn, we'd like to offer you a record deal." It's just like, I'm just a guy who waves my arms around in front of orchestras, and suddenly there's this record company approaching me would you like to make a record? It was just like, it was, all my birthdays and Christmases happened at once. Yeah, of course I want to make my own album. So that's how Smoovin came about, which was kind of weird, really, because I didn't know what to do. And we talked it through, and they suggested that I just did covers of songs that I liked, and then kind of tried to make it into a sort of orchestral stroke funk stroke dance album. It was a shot in the dark, and I was when was 76, something like that.
I believe so.
I was still pretty new, still pretty green, still finding my feet, learning fast, but it's recently re-released. You can get it in digital format. I digitized it and remastered it.
Oh, great!
And you can download it on all the usual platforms. If you go to iTunes or I don't know, all these. I don't do any downstreaming. I hate it. But all these downloading sites, you'll find it. It's called Martyn Ford All Stars.
Oh,
Two
okay.
words, All Stars. You'll find it.
The name got changed.
It's the same. It's the same album. And there's another album as well, which was never released, but that had a minor hit on it. There was a single off that, and I'm about to digitize that and remaster that as well, and that was called Hot Shoe.
Okay.
Smoovin was not my idea. I hated the title. The cover was not my idea. I hated the cover.
The cover is very interesting.
It was totally tasteless and not what I wanted at all, but there we are. But people remember it. To be fair, there were huge, great big life-size cutouts of that girl playing the sax that they sent out to all the, promos, the life-size cardboard cutout stand-up things, and people have still got them in their offices because they were so gross and funny and wonderful, tasteless but tacky but great. So people still remember it. So although I hated it, I take my hat off to the record company that it's actually stayed in people's memories for a very long time.
Yeah, that's marketing, I guess, and I'm sure that
that's
cutout.
Marketing. So I never got that, but that was their department, and I kind of, because I was green and new and had no clout, and they were doing it and paying for it, I kind of had to say I couldn't really dig my heels in and say no, could I? So there we are.
Okay. Well, it's a great album. I really love it's just so well put together. And like you said, this group of musicians you had in your conducting is just excellent.
Well, the rhythm section is just, Simon Phillips. Come on, Simon Phillips is the greatest drummer in the world. He still is the greatest drummer in the world. I went to see him at Ronnie Scott's last Wednesday with his new band Protocol. Are you aware of Simon Phillips' Protocol?
I'm aware of Simon Phillips, but not Protocol.
Okay, so he's made 4 albums with a group called Protocol. He's come up with a really, really hard thought out name of Protocol 1, Protocol 2, Protocol 3, and Protocol 4. And there are four different bands, and the current band is Protocol 4, and they're on the road now. They're absolutely mind-blowingly jaw-dropping. If you go onto YouTube, you can watch them. They're on some other studio. They do live studio sessions. Check them out. They are just stunning. If you like jazz rock fusion,
of course.
Simon's the man. But the rest of the guys on the album, I don't know. I can't remember. Ray Russell, Tony Hymas, Pete Robinson, Johnny Gustafson played bass, and of course he sang in Butterfly Ball. They were just the best guys on the planet at the time, or certainly the best guys in London at the time. So yes, I used the best guys, and my orchestra was on fire. So yes, and I wrote all the music, or at least orchestrated it also. So it was a very self-indulgent album, but I tried to make it as best I can. I mean, Stan Saltzman, the lead sax player, he's still around, still gigging. I saw him 2 weeks ago in Cardiff. Mark Warner, the guitarist, he's American. He's back in the States, so he's still doing it. They were all the best guys. Thank you for liking the album. I mean, you know, clearly it's, 43 years old or something? I mean, clearly some of it sounds dated. Of course it does. It was made 45 years ago. But there are 3 or 4 tracks that I think stand the test of time and still sound wonderful, in my view. I mean, Icarus, I think, is a masterpiece. I didn't write it. I just orchestrated it and produced it. Flight is amazing. Sneaking Up Behind You is amazing. Yeah, I mean, some of that's, and Horny, the track I wrote myself, is totally off the wall, and I really, it makes me laugh every time I hear it. It's just because some of the playing is just so sensational, and it's so off the wall. Really, it was such fun doing it. It was totally self-indulgent, and we got a huge amount of airtime. I mean, a couple of the instrumentals, like the sort of slightly more corny things like Gone with the Wind and Stranger on the Shore, they got a huge amount of airplay here in the UK. I mean, that record was on the radio every day for about 5 years because it was an instrumental. It was a brilliant filler. Mm-hmm. So if DJs had a run up to the news and they didn't have time to play a 3.5 minute pop track with vocals, they'd play 30, 60, 1.5 minute, 90-second excerpts from Gone with the Wind leading up to the news. So it was a really good, funky filler. So it got a huge amount of airplay here, which was great.
Wow, that's great. It is really it's a lot of fun to listen to, and I think a lot of the music at this time, and I got into a lot of this stuff through the Butterfly Ball, honestly, just because there's so many people involved with that, and I love the album so much that I wanted to start branching out and listening to all these. Well, you know, I really love the orchestrations. Who did the orchestrations? Oh, Martyn Ford. Let's hear what he did. And I really love John Gustafson. Let's hear what he did. And as a result, have, I don't know, 50 or 100 different albums that are in my collection that I've accumulated over the years, just as that branch out from this one sensational moment where all of these wonderful people came together. And that's how I learned about you and everything that you've done. I do have to ask too, another favorite of mine, and I see your involvement with, is the Jesus Christ Superstar album.
Minimal involvement, but interesting hookup. Just bear with me a second.
Sure.
When I was at the Royal Academy of Music, one of my first gigs, probably when I was in my 3rd year, was I got a job playing in the pit, playing French horn, of course, playing in the pit in the West End and the Palace Theatre of the very first West End stage production of Jesus Christ Superstar.
Okay.
And in the pit, at 16 years old, playing drums was Simon Phillips. Now, we didn't get to know each other much then, but it's really weird that 5 years later we became really close friends, and he played on my album. And now we're still very, very close friends. I hung out with him for a whole evening last week, as I told you. We had such a great time. Okay, so that's one link. Also on stage singing Mary Magdalene was Yvonne Elliman, who I later went out with when I met her about probably 5 or 6 years later. And then she did us when she left Superstar. I'll get onto the answering the question in a minute.
No, this is great.
When she left Superstar, she did her first solo album that was produced by a chap called Rupert Hine. Does that ring any bells?
It sure does, yeah.
So Rupert Hine was signed to Purple Records, and Roger Glover produced Rupert's first album, and then realising how extraordinarily talented Rupert Hine was, said to Rupert, fuck off, go and produce your own albums, you're much better at it than I am. So Rupert then made some amazing albums with Purple, and I did all the conducting, and my orchestra was on it. But then Yvonne made this for her first album, and if you don't know the first album, it's by far the best thing she ever did. It's much better than all the hit records she had.
Is that Food of Love?
Well done. I'm very impressed that you know that. Have you heard that album?
I've heard bits and pieces of it, yes.
It's all on YouTube. Listen to it. There's a track called Hawaii. There's a track called Muesli Dreams. There's tracks that I arranged and conducted. There's a track that Paul Buckmaster arranged. There's tracks that Simon Jeffs arranged. It's the most astonishing album, and it's the best singing she ever did on that album. All her hits are amazing, but this album supersedes everything else that she ever did.
Oh, she's sensational. Anyway. Yeah, I'll have to give that a really good listen.
Yeah, it's all on YouTube, and it's well worth a listen. I'm still in touch with Rupert. I'm still in touch with Yvonne. When she was that age, she was the most beautiful woman on the planet with the best voice on the planet. She was just a goddess, really. She was just extraordinary. Because I was a fixer in London, that word has odd connotations, I understand that. But fixer also means contractor, what you'd call an agent, whatever you want to call it. We called them a fixer in London. I fixed my orchestra for all these other people. Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice asked me to fix a lot of the musicians and the singers and the orchestra on the original recording of Superstar. That's before the musical ever came out. The original first recording. I did work on that, yes. That was a very long answer to a very short question.
No, that's what I'm looking for. And
It's interesting because it's wonderful for me having these conversations, because unless you'd asked me the question, I wouldn't remember. And all these links that I've just told you about all come flooding back, and they are remarkable coincidental links.
Yeah, it seems like everything I look into when I researching all of these great musicians and these groups, it always comes back to these same, you see the same cross-pollination of musicians on all of these different albums, these same people working together, and it just seems like it was a very great community of musicians and singers and everything at this time working together.
So when I was a teenager living in Cheltenham, which is a spa town in the West Country in England, quite a sort of smart upmarket spa town with 2 private colleges and a grammar school and quite a well-to-do area. I was singing in the local rock band as a lead singer, and just doing covers of Beatles and Stones or whatever. And a group called the Mersey Beats came to the Everyman Theatre, and I went to see them. And on stage was this guy with his hair down to his nipples, playing bass guitar like I'd never seen anybody play bass guitar ever before. And I was just blown away by this bloke called Johnny Gustafson. I'd never heard or seen anything like it before. So I would have been 15 or 16 maybe at the time, maybe 17 or 18, certainly teenage years. 10 years later, Johnny Gustafson and I became really, really close friends, and I worked with him on Butterfly Ball, on Superstar, and we became very close friends. We would see each other. There were like a nucleus of about a dozen of us, Paul Buckmaster, Peter Robinson, Johnny Gustafson, Anne O'Dell, Tony Walmsley, me. A group of us, we hung out every night. If we weren't in the studio, we would be playing, and we'd be over at somebody's house getting wrecked and listening to music. And John and I became really close friends. He played on my album, as you know. And it's just amazing that I should see somebody on stage and be gobsmacked and then become really, really very, very close friends with him 10 years later, which is just wonderful, really. Bless him, he died about, 3-4 years ago now. I just think he had one of the greatest ever voices in rock and roll, and he should have been a superstar. He had just as good a voice as Gillan or Coverdale or any of these other rock singers. And because he started off with the big three, then the Mersey Beats, and then Quatermass, and then he did a lot of other stuff. But he should have been an international superstar and wasn't. But he was just extraordinary talent.
Yeah, it really does make you wonder what with someone. I'm a huge John Gustafson fan, and it does make you wonder what was it that didn't catapult him into superstardom. Like you said, as good as he was a singer, he was such an exceptionally amazing bass player, and to have him in bands like with Ian Gillan, not even show just for his bass playing, really just doing a little background vocal is incredible to think of him not being a lead singer.
I know, and he was in Roxy Music with Brian Ferry as a bass player. I mean, that opening bass riff on "Love Is a Drug," it's so just as soon as you put that on, you know what record it is, and that's Johnny Gus's bass link, And there's this great rock and roll voice, just playing bass guitar. Not just playing; it was a great gig for him to get. It was a well-paid job, and I'm sure he loved it. But I don't know why. It's like I was talking earlier, being in the right place at the right time. And Johnny was never maybe absolutely in the right place at the right time, but everybody adored him. He was just the most likable bloke, and he was very funny. Everybody loved him. You never hear anybody say a bad word about Johnny Gus.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about this, because a friend of mine actually does a show strictly on Paul McCartney and his solo material. So I see your involvement with Live and Let Die, rather, and I want to know what that project was like for you.
Very weird. Very well. I worked with McCartney twice. I worked with McCartney on Back to the Egg, Wings album. Mm-hmm. He rang me up, as you do. You get a phone call from Paul McCartney. What? I couldn't believe it. I thought somebody was playing a hoax. Anyway, he rang me up and said, I bought Black Dyke brass band. I'll tell you a story. Okay, so the most famous brass band in the world at that time, and still possibly is a brass band called the Black Dyke Mills Band. And we have a huge brass band culture here in the UK. And we all know what the alternate word of Black Dyke means, but Black Dyke, it just means a dirty little stream in the north of Yorkshire in the industrial area. That's what it means. He rang me up and said, I booked Black Dyke to come and play a recording session on a couple of tracks of mine at Abbey Road next week. Will you write some music for them? Well, writing for a brass band is a completely different skill and a completely different code. I didn't know how to do it, but I did, and I wrote it, and it went very well, and he was very pleased with what I did, and I did the stuff at Abbey Road, and I've got pictures of me with Paul at Abbey Road conducting this amazing brass band. I'll get on to the answer to the question in a minute. And but Black Dyke wanted to tour America, and the agent in America said, we can't possibly have you touring America, we'll have to change your name. This is the most famous brass band in the world. Asking them to change their name, it's like asking the Beatles to change their name to, the Earwigs. It's just ridiculous. So they refused the tour because they were called Black Dyke, and the Americans said it was totally un-PC to have them touring America. So they turned down the gig. Anyway, I got a phone call from George Martin, who was producing the soundtrack for Live and Let Die, and I worked with George a lot, mainly because he owned or part-owned Air Studios in London, and I recorded tons and tons of stuff at Air Studios. And George and he used my orchestra quite often. And he said, we want to use you, we're thinking of using your orchestra for Live and Let Die. Marvin Hamlish is coming over to London. He's going to be writing the music. He's going to come over and meet you. So I didn't know who Marvin Hamlish was. I'd never heard of him. So he comes over to my house in Barnes, and we sit and talk, and I play him some of the stuff that I've done, and he agrees to use me. And I hated him. I thought he was a really obnoxious, pompous, egocentric, horrible man. I didn't like him at all. He was obviously very talented, but I just didn't like him. I just wasn't my kind of bloke at all. Far too full of himself. But then, his Marvin Hamlish and I'm Martyn Ford, who's his track record is somewhat better than mine. So yes, he used my orchestra, but and that was fine. That was all it was. That was my only connection. I played French horn on some of it, and my orchestra played on a large amount of Live and Let Die, including the actual track Live and Let Die itself. And George, I think Marvin probably conducted it, and George probably produced it. So that's what as I remember it. It was certainly recorded at Air Studios. Another very long answer to a very short question.
Well, that's what I'm looking for. That's great. So you're currently the music director and music supervisor for 2020 Vision. Can you tell us about that?
That project, that was a 5-year project, and that's just finished.
Oh, okay.
But
so
it was a great project, and I really enjoyed it. And we did some wonderful things, lovely videos, some fantastic videos, which I can send you links to if you're interested. There's a pop track and there's a symphonic track. They're really good, and I like them. I'm very proud of them. But that was a 5-year project, and that's done and dusted now. I haven't updated my website for about 10 years, so I'm sorry it's very out of date.
That's okay. Most people haven't, because everyone goes to these social media sites now rather than checking out websites where you can get some great information.
Yeah, I like my website, but it is very out of date. It's on the to-do list. Don't hold your.
Wow, that's great. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. You've given me so much. Anything else we should know about you? What you're working on?
What am I working on? I've been asked to. I occasionally go to Prague. They have a very good recording orchestra there, called the City of Prague Philharmonic. They are a recording orchestra, all set up in studios, fabulous studios there. I go there once or twice a year. I'm going back there in January to do 8 hours of recording sessions for an Australian composer who's written some songs for a Chinese singer that are going to be recorded in Mandarin.
Oh, wow.
This is a huge Chinese singer. Her name is Fifi Rong, and she's had 125 million downloads of her material on the internet. So she's obviously rather big in the Mandarin speaking population, and that's where people are beginning to. So I'm quite pleased to be asked to conduct the orchestra, so I'm doing that. I'm looking forward to that. Prague's a lovely city to go to. I'm not sure about January. It would be fucking cold. But then, Chicago must be cold now.
We've got snow on the ground for a couple of weeks here.
Yeah, we get snow on the ground here for about five or 6 days a year if we're unlucky. Last year we had no snow at all, but we just had a dusting of snow and it disappeared within 24 hours. I like living here. But I got to the age when snow is a pain in the ass because I fall over, or I can't get out to drive, or I can't walk my dog, so I hate it. So that's that project. I work a lot. I live in South Wales, and I live quite near Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales. So I have 2 brass groups that I conduct in Cardiff. One's the City of Cardiff Brass and one's Catay's Brass. I conduct them twice a week, which is great because it keeps me working, keeps my arms and upper body going, keeps my brain active. Music is great. If you're performing, it prevents the onset of senility. So when you get to my age, it's quite important to think about these things. So to be conducting twice a week regularly is very good for me. I play the French horn in a couple of symphony orchestras for fun, amateurs. But, again, playing is very important. I'm lucky at 75, I can still get a noise out of the thing. So I love still playing. I'm still out walking my dogs twice a day. I'm still very active. I still got too much going on. my woman tells me I've got to start slowing down or I'm going to kill myself. But I can't stop. If I stop, I feel like I'm going to die. I just want to. I've still got a lot of energy, so I love doing it.
That's great, and it seems like you're enjoying yourself immensely. So that's what really matters.
It does. That's all it is, really. If I'm not enjoying it, why do it? So I've always loved what I do, and I've been very lucky. I love what I do. I do what I want to do, and I get paid for it. I mean, how many other people can say that?
Sure. Oh, that's great. Well, once again, I really want to thank you for your time here this morning or this afternoon where you are. It's really great. Yeah, I'm looking to connect with as many people from this project as I can, and I've been in touch with a few other people. I actually got in touch with Mo Foster, and looking to speak to him as well. And
say hi to me from Mo, and I have done a lot together. I got him. I got Mo quite a lot of work. I got him the gig with Phil Collins. He worked with Phil Collins for a while, and I got Mo that gig. He may know that I did Phil Collins' first 3 solo albums. So I got Mo on a tour with Phil for a year. They didn't get on very well. Mo was quite difficult to work with in those days. He's a bit angular. But anyway, that's another story. Mo's very good. He's a very good, much better than me at telling anecdotes. He's written a great book, and he's all full of wonderful anecdotes about the scene and recording and everything. He'll be far more entertaining than I am. If you haven't read his book, you ought to. It's good fun.
Yeah, it just arrived yesterday. I had ordered it, so I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Mo's a good guy, and he's a nice player too, and he's still playing. He's still gigging with Ray Russell. I think Mo may have played on some of my stuff. Certainly Ray Russell did, and they work together a lot now. Listen, man, it's such a pleasure talking to you. The pleasure's mine, honestly, because it's very nice for my brain to resurrect this shit, because you do forget. So do me a favor, when you actually cobble this together, please let me have a link to it, because I'd love to read it.
I certainly would. Yeah. Well,
it's a written blog, presumably, is it?
It's a podcast, so it's audio. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, send me the link to the audio, please. I'd love to have it.
I certainly would. Yeah, and this is honestly the first. We've done about 30-something, 32, 33 shows so far, and we haven't actually had any interviews yet. So this would be the first one. So we've got to figure out how that's going to fit in the format. So we've got everything recorded through December, so it'd probably be sometime next month that we post it. And once I get it all edited, I will certainly.
So you're literally going to take together what we've spoken about, and you're going to edit it and put it into a manageable listen, 10-15 minutes or something, yeah?
Yeah. We're not sure about that either. We might put like some snippets in there, or we might have a link to the full interview somewhere else for other people to listen to. But yeah, we have to figure that out. It was such a surprise to get a response from you that I wasn't really expecting it. So no, I was like, great, I'll talk to Martyn Ford. This is great. And now I've got to figure out what to do.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. That's great. Well, look, keep me posted. And if it's really not a problem, you're not imposing on me at all. I have a certain amount of free time, especially in the daytime here. So I won't keep you any longer. But if there's anything else you want to ask me, you've forgotten about, you want to talk about, or you think of something else, do it again, or send me an email. I've got your email address. Just out of interest, when I get a minute, I'll send you a link to these 2 2020 visions video, the 2020 vision videos, because I hope and think you might enjoy them, because visually they are stunning.
Great.
They are the 20 greatest wildlife photographers in Great Britain, with music that I put to it, and it is jaw-dropping stuff. It's really, really good, and I hope you might enjoy those. Just as an aside, and yeah, if you think of anything else, and say hi to Mo, and if you want to be put in touch with anybody else and you don't know how to get in touch with them, just drop me a nod and I'll put you in touch.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. All the best, mate. And yeah, let me have the link to the blog when it's up and running.
Absolutely.
Take care.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All the best. Bye.
And And that was it. That was the interview with Martyn Ford. Really hoping that you enjoyed this special bonus edition of the Deep Purple podcast. We'll be back on our regular Monday with the next episode. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening to the Deep Purple podcast. If you like what you hear and would like more episodes in the future, please donate on Patreon to support the show. You can also give us a rating on iTunes to help new people discover the show. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for show updates. See deeppurplepodcast.com for more details. Thank you for listening.